Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody had a good lunch, and it's nice to see that the room is completely packed. So that's pretty cool. Unfortunately, the original moderator that should be sitting here couldn't participate. He didn't get arrested, so that's cool. Anyway, I'll be moderating the panel today. My name is Dylan. I'm also @LeadDog on Twitter. And we're here to have an iOS OS X security panel discussion. And of course, with me is the world-famous jailbreak iOS security experts assembled here in Kuala Lumpur. I'll start on my left with planetbeing. Perhaps maybe you might want to just introduce the guys a little bit about yourself, but I'm sure everybody knows who you are.
Okay. My name is David Wang. I go by planetbeing online. I've been in the jailbreak scene since the iPhone came out, basically, and I also worked on porting Linux and Android to the iPhone way back when, and I pretty much helped with every single jailbreak. So,
sweet. MuscleNerd?
I'm Muscle. I'm not on.
Oh, we're having some audio problems.
Can you hear me? Why don't you skip me and come back?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. We'll skip MuscleNerd for a while. We'll come back to him.
Okay, so I'm Patu-G. I've worked for the latest jailbreaks on the iPhone and iOS. I've been on the iPhone hacking scene since 2009, and worked on different things on the boot ROM stuff, iBoot stuff, and then userland and kernelland stuff.
And Mark?
Hey, I'm Mark Dowd. I am a security vulnerability researcher. I've been doing it for a long time. I only recently started looking at iOS this year, particularly in the late parts of iOS 5, and really looking at the iOS 6 security that has emerged recently. So I'm a relative newcomer compared to all these guys.
Yeah, but you had an awesome presentation yesterday.
Yeah, I agree.
Could you tell us a little bit more about your presentation that you did yesterday on iOS 6?
Yeah, I mean, the presentation we did focused on kernel security improvements that they've made on iOS 6, and they basically did a huge overhaul of many of the security features compared to previous iOS versions, adding like ASLR, heap hardening strategies, address-based protection, and all sorts of other things. So it's significantly harder to write kernel exploits for iOS 6 than it was for iOS 5.
Cool. Planet, I mean, could you guys give us a bit of what research you guys have been working on with regards to iOS 6 and the findings and the changes between the OS?
I've been actually looking at the same thing that Mark has for a while, and actually I'm glad I attended his talk yesterday because he gave me some new ideas. We had some kernel vulnerabilities left over that Apple had successfully mitigated with its new changes in iOS 6, but Mark showed that those changes are definitely overcomable. I don't think we have anything for userland yet, but we still have a few tricks up our sleeves, I guess.
What about improvements to like the baseband? MuscleNerd, perhaps, maybe?
Well, there's actually been a drastic change in the baseband stuff over the last year. It used to be very hard to get an unlock for anyone except for the designated carriers, but nowadays you can go to almost any website and get from between $10 and $70. You can get an unlock for any device, almost all the way back to the first iPhone, and it doesn't require any hacks. It's sort of a business end sort of hack where they're getting into the database,
right?
But it doesn't require any software hacks per se. So it's almost like there's almost no need to even address, except for the uniqueness of the baseband hacking in its own right. There's no real purpose to hacking a baseband anymore for the iPhone.
What about with the iPhone 5? Like, there's a new chip. Does that really change things for baseband hacking and unlocking?
Well, I mean, ironically, it's exactly the same situation. You can, almost the day of the release of the iPhone 5, you could go off and get an unofficial, but still just as official unlock through one of these, the web unlockers.
So fundamentally, what has actually changed on a hardware level?
Well, fundamentally, it's the business end that's changed.
Right.
They now have enough people working at all the carriers to be able to surreptitiously insert IMEIs into Apple's official database, and just not get noticed doing it. It's just, I think it's just taken a while for the iPhone to get as popular as it has for them to be able to do this without being noticed.
But now it's, that's why it's so popular now. You can get it from almost any corner website.
Sweet. Portuguese, maybe you might want to give us a bit of your thoughts on iOS 6.
Yeah.
The work that you've been doing as well.
On iOS 6, I was pausing because of my job. I have something to work on at the moment. So I've paused my work, but I've resumed like a week ago. We have split it, in fact, our work on iOS 6. I mean, David is now working on the kernel part and trying to exploit it, to exploit the old vulnerabilities we had by the past that because of the new securities don't work anymore. So he's trying to fix that, and myself is working on the userland patch, trying to find a vulnerability to trigger the code execution at boot up or something. At the moment, I'm kind of stuck. I have to recognize, but it could change in a week, or it's luck. I think.
Luck.
Yeah.
Mark, you did a paper yesterday on iOS 6, and the findings that you found, I believe you actually presented a jailbreak of some sort, and you actually showed Cydia running. Could you explain a bit more about the technical aspects of how that was possible?
Yeah, the thing we demonstrated was not actually a jailbreak, like it doesn't achieve persistence like a jailbreak does.
Yep.
The thing we demonstrated was an internal tool that we made. Tajay Mant, who is presented with me, did a lot of work on that tool, and basically it used a kernel mode exploit to gain full privileges to the iOS 6 version running on the phone, and from there it makes modifications to various things within the kernel so that we can run unsigned code, or like basically turn individual policies on and off to make it so that we can debug stuff more readily.
What's interesting is that although that kind of a jailbreak isn't as popular, it wouldn't ever be as popular as a jailbreak as we know it today. It's actually a lot more useful to people who are security conscious and who don't want to. When you do a jailbreak, you really are weakening the defenses of your phone in many ways. So that sort of a jailbreak is actually preferred by a segment of jailbreakers, because you don't want to open things completely up. You want to be able to, with the flick of the button, you want to be able to turn policies on and off.
Yeah.
Sweet. So the findings that Mark has, how much added benefit does that give, like say you guys, so iPhone dev team or Portuguese? I mean, like how much does that improve the amount of work that you guys could? Does it shorten the time that we could probably see some kind of jailbreak or unlock?
Well, Mark has given a lot of excellent ideas to all of us, including Apple. So it's sort of a...
That's a double-edged sword.
Yes, it's definitely a double-edged sword. His talk was extremely interesting. I mean, there were a lot of things that were disclosed and a lot of things that are useful. I would say that some things that Apple could close, and some things, are more general techniques that can be applied to more than one vulnerability, which is, useful to all researchers, that Apple definitely can't mitigate without any sort of major architectural changes. So I would say that overall it does help jailbreakers, but it definitely, it's not a completely, it's not a completely good thing for us.
And Pot, what do you think?
Yeah, I want to explain something. In fact, a jailbreak is different things. There, the kernel part, the kernel exploit that is required to modify the kernel itself, so it can, for example, map readable, executable, and writable pages. This is one part of the jailbreak, but there are different parts needed as well, because we need to inject the required files to the device. We have also to have some code execution at userland to trigger the kernel exploit. And sometimes this exploit is not the same as the one that it is started on boot up. So in fact, also we have to package everything in a tool. So I mean, when you have a kernel exploit, a working jailbreak for developers, I mean, this is only a few % of the work needed to make the whole stuff. What Mark did with his colleague on the kernel exploitation is really impressive, because they bypassed a lot of securities in the kernel, but it's only a part of the whole stuff to do. So I expect people to request the jailbreak. Oh, okay, it's done, so you can release it next week, right? But no, it doesn't work this way.
Cool. So what do you guys think, in your opinion, would it take for Apple to actually stop jailbreaks, or close it to the point where it's just no longer feasible, or it just takes too much time and nobody's going to be bothered to do it?
I mean, one policy way they could do it is just by offering all the same freedom that you get with the jailbreak with the official OS. And in a large way, they have done that with almost everything that was in. If you look back on the original jailbreaks and what they offered, Apple has come, to this date, they've offered, 99% of what you could do back then. There are some things that they'll never be able to open up just because of security,
right.
Especially when it deals with accessing devices directly and all that, or hardware directly.
Right.
But one policy way they can do it is just by doing what they're continuing to do now, which is offer more and more flexibility in the OS.
But what about from a technical standpoint? Is there anything they can really do to, I don't know?
They can stop changing software. I mean, if this stuff is static, but they things grow and they put new features in, and these features aren't always fully tested, and so.
Do you think there would be a hardware chip that they might add on that actually, adds on extra security features, perhaps?
There are hardware enforcements already that are part of the policy in place today. I mean, the things that are enforced today are enforced ultimately at the base level with hardware, with hardware assisted.
Sweet. If anybody from the audience wants to have a question as well, please feel free to raise your hand and I will call on you guys. All right? Oh, sorry, Glenn, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to add that one thing that they did that was really effective in stopping unlocks is that they had a hardware switch that made sure that all memory that is executable in the baseband can no longer be written to, and vice versa. Any memory that can be writable is not executable. And this is a hardware switch that once turned on cannot be turned off. And it was really effective in stopping us from doing baseband unlocks. And implementing something like that in iOS would also be very effective. Unfortunately, there's no way they can do it because they still need they still need applications to be loaded from software. They need different developers to keep developing applications. It's a completely different environment. So I don't think they can lock it down ever, technically, as well as they could on the baseband. And the best reason I think that Apple has stopped baseband unlocks so much is that there's been so many easier ways to get your iPhone unlocked just from a policy standpoint. And I think, if they really wanted to stop jailbreaking, they would change their policy so that you could do more and more stuff without jailbreaking.
Also, maybe something to add. With every iOS version, the security is reinforced more and more, so that maybe one time no jailbreaks will be possible. I mean, in a possible period of time, in between two releases of iOS, maybe we won't be able to find exploits to jailbreak it. That's possible. I don't see the point, in fact, of Apple trying to secure iOS in a way that we can't execute tweaks on the system modification. I'm sure they could find something. They could find something that permits to secure their business with the App Store, but letting people do tweaks on the operating system. I'm sure they can find something, and this is my message to Apple. Please open your system.
So you heard it first, man. Apple, please open the system.
In a way, it's actually bit them in the behind recently with all this Maps business, and all these people. Forget about the iPhone 5 people, but everyone who was on iOS 5 and they got forced into iOS 6. They realized when they saw the stinky Maps application, and they wanted to go back down to 5, that they couldn't do it. And ultimately, they can't do it because, Apple is so focused on not letting you downgrade so that you can't take advantage of previous unlocks or jailbreaks, whatever.
Right.
That policy is so strict that it's actually, I think it's affected their bottom line with this map stuff because people are realizing, I'm really being pushed forward by Apple. I don't really have even the freedom to be on the OS that I was on an hour ago, even though I just upgraded. Why can't I go back down to 5? You can't do it because Apple just, it's a policy.
Do you think Apple will ever come about with like what Google Android is doing, where it's unlocked bootloader? Never?
I can't see a good reason for them to go that far. I mean, I could see them opening up in a lot of ways, but not to that degree.
Yeah, I think that ship has sailed. I think they probably thought about it when they were first doing iOS and they decided it was a bad idea or something like that, because I can't see them going back now. They wouldn't have a reason to.
Any questions from the audience? I'm sure you guys have some questions. Yeah, please.
I was just wondering if any of you guys is working on Apple TV 3 and how much it overlaps with iOS.
Anybody working on Apple TV 3?
None of us are working on Apple TV 3, but we know people who do some of the Apple TV stuff. There's a lot of overlap. The kernel is the same, for example, and a lot of the system services are the same, but not all of them. For one thing, the mobile backup service that we used to inject the exploit that we use for previous jailbreaks is not present on the Apple TV. So the attack surface for some of the user land stuff, especially the injection stuff, is a lot smaller. So yeah, there are a lot of overlaps, but it's also particularly challenging.
I mean, so there's very little interaction between the user or iTunes and the Apple TV 3. Right. And so you're going through the remote, and otherwise the Apple TV is going off and talking to the network. You're not really interacting with it directly. So there's very little, there's very few opportunities to muck with your communication with the device.
Yeah, this is the point. Yes, there's a lot of service that overlaps. There's a lot of, for example, the different exploits that we used for previous version of iOS. The userland exploit, the kernel exploit, the entry tethering exploit, everything works on the Apple TV 3. In fact, there is no issue with this, but we can't just send the file at the right place on the file system. We miss this this part of the jailbreak. So as I said previously, a jailbreak is a lot of exploits and different stuff, and we miss only one part on the Apple TV. I think with iOS 6 we will try to find an injection vector that's compatible. We will try to do this to find an injection vector that's compatible with the Apple TV 3, but the attack surface is reduced, so I don't know.
Cool. We've got a question here that's coming in from Twitter, and also if anybody of you are watching this on Ustream, I think there's like about 250, 300 people currently tuned in. If you guys have questions that you want to ask the panel, please tweet us with the hashtag #HITB live, and we'll ask your question. So one of the questions that's here is actually, what's the most complex, difficult part of jailbreak creation? Mark, maybe you might want to kick us off.
I've done a bit of userland stuff, but mostly focused on kernel stuff. And
right.
Like I was saying, it's a lot different now in iOS 6 to how it was in iOS 5. There's definitely a lot of challenges there. But in terms of some of the stuff these other guys were talking about putting files on the file system at the right place, I haven't had to do that for my work, so I've been lucky for that.
Potaji, what do you think? Like, what would you guys think is the most difficult part about the jailbreak creation? Let's just say,
Yeah, we talked about this. It's interesting with Mark some minutes ago. By the past, the most difficult part was the userland one, and the kernel part was the really easy one because there were no protection at all in the kernel. Now, I think with iOS 6, this is different, and both parts are at the same complexity. That's why we split our work with David.
Could you explain a little bit more about the split in work that you guys did?
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm mostly interested in kernel stuff because, I don't know, I've always been interested in kernels and low-level hardware type of things, and Pod2G has a lot more experience with the user land side of things. My background comes from all the way back when we were doing bootloader exploits and boot ROM exploits, so I tend to be more comfortable with that sort of thing. And Pod2G's obviously come from a more, traditional background in the types of exploits that are more generally interesting to the security community, like return-oriented programming and things like that.
Although a significant departure from that was Shatter, right? Shatter?
Chatter, yeah.
So, I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about Shatter? I mean, that SHATTER, the boot ROM level stuff that went library. I mean, that's what you really came through with that, but it ended up not being useful in the public jailbreak because of library.
You want me to talk about Chatter, in fact?
Right. Well, I'm just contrasting your.
That's true. I forgot about the first thing that we worked on together, which is a bootloader thing, which is a boot ROM thing. The first thing we worked on together was actually what was it called? It was called 24K Pwn. That's right. And yeah, so completely forgot about that.
Yes. Yeah, we worked together on this first exploit. I mean. It was in 2009, so that's some years ago. Yeah, we dumped the boot ROM. Then by static analysis, we found that there were some overflow in the BSS, and David came with the idea that we could use it to modify the SHA-1 registers. And write to the stack of the boot ROM. I remember it was really interesting, amazing stuff, because working on the boot ROM is not like working on userland stuff. You're playing with your IDA, trying to do static analysis and find the right places. You don't have any feedback from the boot ROM. Yeah, it's
right.
Nice stuff.
You can't see the stack at all. Because there's no crash dumps or anything like that. So you basically have to statically analyze and try to reconstruct what the stack should be at the time of the crash. And I really love doing static analysis because I love doing reverse engineering. It's really slow, and sometimes I could do a lot faster by just attaching a debugger or something like that. But I just have more fun doing static analysis.
I'm the same way. I always go back to static analysis and debug when it's absolutely necessary, and I can't avoid it anymore.
Right. So we've got a question here from Twitter. Is there any chance that we'll get a low-level boot ROM exploit surfacing again? You guys ever think we'll see that again?
I mean, we don't really even have a boot ROM dump of the more recent devices, so that's extremely unlikely.
I mean, there's a chance that they might have changed the boot ROM with the iPhone 5, right?
Right. It's just that, I mean, you mean as far as our being able to dump it?
Well, I mean, the iPhone 5 uses a different connector. There might be a chance that they change the boot ROM. There might be a chance that they introduce some bugs to it with that change, and there might be a chance that they didn't make it as securely unreadable as it was. Oh, right. We haven't really looked at it, is the truth. Right. So yeah.
There's a lot to be done with that, especially with the new connector, figuring out even at the hardware level how to use the new connector.
Right.
But that would be the first step, would be getting the boot ROM dump. You can't really do much before that. You can certainly crash it, but you're not going to be able to do much past that.
So where do you guys start when you want to find a vulnerability in iOS? Like, what do you guys do to start looking for vulnerabilities? Where do you even begin?
Well, I mean, a lot of times you end up reusing where you've been before. Apple oftentimes fixes directly the problem that you exposed with the jailbreak, but they don't go off and fix the root problem, or they don't completely fix what you exposed in the first place. So a lot of times there's reuse. I think between the last two jailbreaks, there was a little bit of reuse. I mean, if Apple had gone and looked at Raccoon more rigorously after the January jailbreak, they would have prevented the March one.
So have the exploits that you guys used in 5.1.1, jailbreak, have they all been closed?
Yeah, all verified. Yeah.
I've actually asked Patiji the question, how did he find vulnerabilities several times in the past, because he finds a lot more vulnerabilities than I do. And his answer is, I get lucky, apparently. I don't know what that means. So I just hope that he gets lucky again with the new version.
But for instance, you went up and you looked at the CVEs at some point, right? For Raccoon,
Yeah, for Raccoon, yeah, I watched the mailing lists of it and found a bug, but yeah, that's why I call it luck. So one guy reported a problem with Raccoon that if you have put three mod config sections in the configuration file, it crashes Raccoon, and nobody answered to him in the mailing list. So I just tried to do the same on my iPhone, and luckily it crashed. So in fact, the problem was not about the mod config sections, but it was related to the number of DNS statements in it. But anyway, it was luck. The whole stuff was luck, because the configuration of the memory, the configuration of everything permits to exploit it, to bypass ASLR, everything. So yeah, it was luck.
Sweet.
And Comex has had a mixture of things. Right? Comex has also looked at CVEs for the WebKit stuff. I mean, Comex's stuff is famously, it's all the web-based jailbreaks, right? Jailbreak 2, jailbreak me kind of jailbreaks. But he's gone off, and some of the stuff he's used has been from mailing lists for CVEs, for stuff that he knew that was in the WebKit that were still being used on iOS. But on the other hand, he's gone off and created brand new CVEs, of course, finding new stuff. So he's done a mixture.
Cool. We got a question here from Craig of WWJC, who wants to know whether you guys keep any of the holes in your sleeves between iOS releases. So are there bugs that you guys have that you haven't really fully disclosed yet?
Yeah, we have a couple of kernel ones right now. There's no userland ones that I know of, but userland ones tend to be, we have to use a lot of them to do like one single jailbreak, so we have to use up a lot. So we don't really have a buffer for those.
I think it's imperative that you always have an ace up your sleeve. So, yeah, you've got to keep something in reserve for a rainy day.
Definitely. Do you have anything to add, Patiji?
Yeah, we have some stuff. Yeah, kernel. We have some injection vector. We have also people seen that on Twitter, but there is a jailbreak that fail break that exists that permits to execute unsigned code on the device, but it requires to have a developer certificate to use it. And developers, are under NDA, so we cannot use this stuff anyway. And it relies on some executable that it is developers only stuff. So yes, we have different things. We miss, like I said earlier, the userland part. I'm still confident we can find something in the next few weeks.
That's good news. Good news for everybody. Any questions from the floor? Miko?
Hi there, Mikko from F-Secure. Great panel. I have a question regarding general security on iOS devices. iPhone has been out for 5 years now. As you know, we've seen no real-world malware problems on iPhones at all, or iOS devices at all. That's despite the fact that these vulnerabilities exist, and basically many of these jailbreaks are basically drive-by downloads. Exactly the same technique could be used to do malicious stuff on phones. Any ideas why we haven't seen real-world malicious attacks on iOS?
We might just not be detecting them yet. I don't know. I don't see any reason why there couldn't be. But it's a significant amount of investment for the attacker, I suppose, because they have to generally use so many exploits and stuff like that. But definitely, if there's money to be made, I'm sure people will do it. You know.
I think it's a mixture of, I think back in the early days when it was easy to adapt jailbreaks for your own use, nefarious or not, I think it was just a lot less popular back then. Nowadays, iPhone is extremely popular, but the methods used to do the jailbreak, it's a chain of multiple exploits, one after the other, and I think it's just more complicated for a random third party to adapt without a lot of insight to adapt these jailbreaks for their own reasons. But again, I also don't believe that it's not happening. I think it's probably happening. We don't see it. It's my guess.
I don't see any reason at all why we couldn't have malwares on iOS, but there's something I want to point out is that you said it's the same process, in fact, to jailbreak or to create a malware. It's not actually true because we are only using local exploits, in fact, in latest jailbreaks. So yeah, it was true with Jailbreak Me and web-based jailbreaks, but it's not really true with local exploits and latest jailbreaks we did.
And I think actually we've had some sort of mitigation on our own part. At Jan 0, I believe when there was a certificate problem that was causing some concern, he went off and as part of the jailbreak, as part of a downloadable package for the jailbreak, he went off and fixed this certificate problem where I think it was some untrusted certificate authority or something. But he went off and just made it available as a package so that you could actually beef up that version of the firmware compared to the stock version of the firmware by being jailbroken and by installing his package. So it's kind of that kind of thing is interesting also.
I think every time we had a sort of a drive-by download situation, we always had a patch for it released at the same time, in fact. Not that I think that's relevant because the percentage of iPhones that are actually jailbroken is relatively low. So, there's always going to be a lot of people who wouldn't be patched by it. But it's there.
Cool. Any other questions from the audience? We've got about 25 minutes left, more or less.
This question is kind of directed towards David a little bit more. A while ago, you went through and reversed almost every single part of the iPhone to the point where you got Android running on it completely, and you could even accept and send phone calls on it. Can you explain a little bit about how you did that and what would be necessary for us to be able to do that on the latest devices?
Yeah, it's been a while, and there's been a lot of changes, but basically what I did was I looked at the bootloader, iBoot, which uses most of it, which has pretty simple code, is pretty compact, smaller than the entire iOS kernel, and it uses a lot of the hardware. So I went through and basically picked it apart, figured out how to run all the devices, at least at a basic level, and then I wrote Linux drivers for all of these various different hardware devices. There are a lot of different hardware devices, and that's basically what I did. Probably the hardest part was just getting the flash translation layer working because it was a very complex algorithm. Right now, we still have access to the bootloaders for the latest devices with the exception of the iPhone 5, I believe, and the 4S. So with those, you could basically reverse. Actually, you also have the kernel for the 4S and the newer iPads, so you could basically reverse the kernel, or you could also reverse the iBoot on the earlier devices in order to figure out how everything works.
I think the FTL is an example of somewhere where it was just so. Now, I mean, I believe people continued with this work, trying to get other iPhones and other firmwares working with Android. But the FTL ended up being a really big issue. I think it ended up killing those projects because the FTL by itself is just changing so frequently, just because Apple's using better and better code or they're using different that you just can't keep track of it. I mean, not only do you have a different FTL for different devices, but you have different versions of FTL through the different firmwares, and it's rapidly updating. And I think that just sort of, I think that I think while you could get in early and you could focus on one firmware on one device, I think trying to expand that to multiple devices, multiple FTLs, ends up being quite a task.
Yeah, believe me, you really have to have absolutely no life to even reverse the FTL once. So.
Cool. Any other questions from the audience? No? Okay, no problem. Let's see. Oh, we do have questions from the audience.
Hi, sorry to be at the back. Question to any one of you members. What would it take to develop something like an emulator, like a proper QEMU type thing for running pure iOS stuff on it? So, we love to break things and play and make it non-persistent.
Well, Chris Wade had a version of that for some of these earlier devices, and it was a branch of QEMU, and it was working to quite a good degree. I think he was booting all. I don't know if he was able to get past. I don't think he was able to emulate to the point of getting past Fair Play, which is used for a lot of the protection of the iTunes content. But it was booting. It was booting all the way into the OS and at least starting some of the basic apps. But that has since stopped development. And I think it's just, Chris went off and joined this other company and just could not devote the time to it. So the pieces are there, though. I mean, if you want to pick it up, the pieces for doing that are still out there.
Yeah, I mean, in order to do that in the first place, you have to actually reverse everything, reverse almost everything about the hardware. So you basically would have to almost be able to make a Linux Android port before you're able to write an emulator in the first place. So obviously that's a lot of work. And there also might be additional legal issues, like Apple really hates it when you run their software on stuff that's not Apple devices.
I mean, Apple hates anything that you do anyways. So.
Yeah, but Apple really hates that.
Apple even hates if you make complaints about their hardware. Like the new Retina display that I'm holding, it has a ghosting effect. I can see the ghost of Steve Jobs in there. But they'll hate it if I tell them.
Part of the issue is that the hardware itself is proprietary in a lot of cases.
That's right.
So it's hard to write a good emulator if you don't have documentation for the registers of the bits and pieces of the phone.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
Cool. We've got a question here from Twitter. Is free public jailbreaking sustainable? Free public jailbreaking. So jailbreaks that are available for free without,
Well, I mean, I don't ever see a paid public jailbreak ever happening.
Me neither. But
it's sustainable as long as there's people, continued interest in it. I think it's unfair to expect a jailbreak on the 0.0 release of anything coming out of Apple. I think there are some things that you actually wait until the 0.0 release to make public. But I think a lot of times, 0.0 releases bring in so many changes you need to sit back and sort of see where you are before you can make something. And I think, that's exactly what happened with 5.0, right? There was by the time you had your stuff for the 5.x jailbreak, it was already 5.01, right? So, I mean, I think timing is, I think while we set up some expectations for something to be available so quickly, all the time, I think the reality is that when there's a major change like this, which there will be every time there's a 0.0 release, you need to sit back and expect there to be another sub-release, another 1 or 2 sub-releases from Apple before you can see something public.
Cool. Okay, so for somebody who's new on the scene or who wants to get involved with jailbreaking, what's the best way to get involved with it, and what's the kind of tools that you would need, or what kind of software do you guys use?
Okay, I've answered this question a lot of times. So to start on jailbreaking, first you need to understand everything related to exploitation, because it involves every kind of exploits. So you have to start reading books on it, like for example, iOS Hackers Handbook that was released some months ago, or OS X Hackers Handbook, or I've one book that I like much is a guide to kernel exploitation, something like that, and it's really nice also. So when you understand all the principles of these books, you can enter the jailbreaking community. In fact.
I have a question, Patuji. Did you read all these books before you joined the jailbreaking community?
No, but I started a long time ago. I mean, at that time, things were pretty different. There were no protections, no heap protections, no stack protection, anything. So it was just easy at that time. Even if we did some crazy stuff with the boot ROM and all, yeah. It was easy. Today it is not anymore, and it is only a few people, people involved in security research. People, in fact, speakers here or people in the assembly here can do this. I don't think newcomers, maybe guys with some development knowledge or something, can enter the jailbreaking community like this.
I kind of agree with Pod2G. It really depends where you're starting from. Like I said before, I only started doing iOS stuff fairly recently, but I was very familiar with exploitation stuff from all previous work that I've done. And I thought the easiest way to start with iOS stuff was basically download the XNU source and start reading, and then like try a few things on OS X, and if it looked like it was working out, then transition over to iOS. So that's how I got started in it.
I have a few comments. I think Lime Rain, obviously the Lime Rain exploit on an A4 device gives you a perfect opportunity to dabble into, you don't even need to do the full jailbreak. It's enough, a lot of times I think it would be very satisfying and enough to get a piece of it working. David once gave some advice to this question a long time ago. You probably don't even remember that you gave this answer. But he gave this very great answer, which is, one way to get into it is to pick something that you can't do right now on iOS and just use that as your ultimate goal. Not something grand and lofty like a jailbreak, a general jailbreak. But let's say you want to be able to, I don't know, put the slider for unlocking the device on the top instead of the bottom. Just figure out what, just have one specific goal in mind, and then just, spend the next few months trying to get to that point. And that allows you to ask the right questions, because a lot of times most of all of us are available either through Twitter DMs or through IRC, and we're able to answer specific questions, or we're glad to answer specific questions, but it's very difficult to answer a generic question like how do I jailbreak, right? Yeah. If you have specific questions about what does this dial-I have to do with this, or if you have very specific technical questions, it's a lot easier for us to help you to get to that goal.
Okay, there's a specific question here. Was how exactly did you guys get the boot ROM for the 3GS and the 4?
3GS and the 4? Which?
It's a 3GS.
Yeah, and the 4, and the iPhone 4. How did you guys get the boot ROM dumped for it?
That was a long time ago, wasn't it? Let me try to remember. I think it was still, at that point, it was still, the boot ROM was still mapped into kernel memory.
Yeah, exactly.
So we had some sort of kernel exploit. I don't even know what we had anymore, but you could just read a memory range and it would be there. There was a slightly different situation for earlier devices where they turned off the boot ROM, but that wasn't the case for 3GS.
Yeah, in fact, we had the 3GS. There's two versions of it. They're the old boot ROM and the new boot ROM. And we had the jailbreak with the old boot ROM 1 using Red Snow, and you managed to use some kernel exploit to dump the boot ROM.
I also remember something about helping GeoHot dump a boot ROM at some point. Something
that
about
was for the first GS. Yeah.
That was for the first 3GS. Yeah, there was he had, I think, a bootloader, an iBoot exploit, and he wanted to be able to dump the boot ROM, but he couldn't find it. And there was an MIU setting, the memory interface unit setting, that would let you map the boot ROM back to 0x0. And I knew about this earlier from my work reverse engineering the earlier iPhones, so that's what we did. And I probably got a copy of the boot ROM from him or something like that after he dumped it. So.
And that was a mixture of GeoHot had the hack to actually get the execution during iBoot when it was needed. And then David was, he came along with the technical expertise to, it wasn't really a hack that you were providing, you were just showing him exactly how the hardware is supposed to be used.
Right.
I mean, you need to set the MIU up in this way to be able to read that part of the SoC. And so some of it ends up being just how do you use the chip, how do you use these registers.
Right.
There's another question here. The iPhone 5 connector has changed. So is kernel debugging still possible with the new connector, the new Lightning connector?
I find it hard to believe that Apple doesn't debug the kernel through the same connector for production devices right now. A lot of times Apple, when they're doing a debug of something, they need it to be precisely the device and the firmware that's running on the customers, on the production release. So I'm confident that you can use that thinner connector to do kernel debugging, because I know Apple must be doing it.
Sweet. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left. I guess we got maybe 2 questions from the floor, max.
Sorry, I'm going to ask a general question. Why? I would like to hear from each of you, why do you do the things you do? What's your motivation?
We do this for fun, of course.
Yeah.
Like, for example, since last JailbreakCon, we are focused on this stuff with David. He's working on it like the night, the whole day. Also, I'm thinking of it every time. It's challenging. It's like a puzzle, and it's really, really fun. We do this for the challenge.
Yeah, it's very engrossing. It's hard. It's like doing a really complex Sudoku puzzle or crosswords or something like that, but it's like 10 times harder, and it's just entertaining to be able to use your brain in that way for a long time, and that's really the only reason that I do it.
Yeah, it's fun, and also it's really quite rewarding when you get something working where at first you look at it and you're like, there's no way this is going to work out. And everything eventually falls into place after you've been tearing your hair out about it. And yeah, it's quite rewarding when it finally comes off too.
And I do it for a few reasons. I'm a hardware engineer by my day job, and so that's why a lot of my focus on this stuff has been at the iBoot level or at the baseband hardware level. It's just because it's really interesting to me to, just in a geeky way, to be able to toy with these registers and stuff that I shouldn't have access to. But a lot of that stuff doesn't really make it into a public jailbreak. It's not needed for it, but it's fun to tinker around with that. Secondly, it's also interesting just to be able to play this game with Apple. I think it's interesting to see them react to stuff that you do. It's really rewarding to see that you're doing something that ends up making a software or a fundamental change in the way they do things. I think that's fun.
Cool, I'll take one last question from the floor, and then I'll ask the question that everybody on the internet and everybody in this room wants to know. So one last question from the floor.
If Apple gives you the opportunity to work for them, why should you accept or decline the offer?
I would be really interested and proud to work with Apple, because I think in the security team there are people that are really talented. I think I have a lot of knowledge to get from them. So I think it would be a really good experience to work for Apple. Then it depends on a lot of stuff. I'm pretty sure they would like me to come to the United States, or they would like me to leave the jailbreaking and stuff. So yeah, it's kind of complicated. Yeah.
But fundamentally, it's a different job. It's a different job to prevent attacks than to do the attack. And I think it just, depending on what kind of offer you got, you don't want to be pigeonholed into someone who's doing something that fundamentally is different than what we're doing right now.
Right. Yeah, being on the defense is never fun. So
yeah, offense is more fun. And also for me, I work for myself, so they basically can't offer me something better than that.
Okay, so we've got like about 5 more minutes. I can probably take one last question from the floor, actually. Anybody? Okay, no problem. We'll take a question from Twitter. collectively, you guys have probably like 1 million Twitter followers. Has fame affected you guys negatively, positively? You just talk a bit about what's it like to have, I don't know, 400,000 crazy fools who are retweeting every single thing that you guys say?
I think part of it is you can't really say much that's not jailbreak related, right? I don't use my Twitter account for anything that's not jailbreak related. It's just it wouldn't make sense, and people would just barrage me with more questions than are worth it. And so that's one aspect to it. And I'm not on Facebook at all.
Oh yeah, I'm really happy, and of course I want to thank everyone following me on Twitter. This is nice.
More followers.
Yeah, it's a way, in fact, to motivate us, because there's a lot of good messages in the mention. Well, okay, there's a lot also of bad messages, but I don't look at them at all. And also, I'm not quite like Eric, MuscleNerd. I use my Twitter for announcing jailbreaking stuff and news, but also to joke a little. And people always answer to me, and I think we have a good relationship. It's fun, yeah.
Mark, have you just seen like 20,000 extra followers since yesterday?
No, I actually don't have 100,000 followers, so I don't know what it's like. But I will say that after we did our presentation yesterday, MuscleNerd mentioned in passing our demo, and I immediately got like several hundred followers, and then like 10 people asking me if I was going to release an iOS 6 jailbreak. So I was like, what?
MuscleNerd wanted to share the pain a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a horrible medium for answering questions. It absolutely is. It's horrible. A lot of times when people ask me, when I'm able to see questions that are technical questions, I'll just directly follow them and engage them in DMs. You just cannot answer questions. If you answer a technical question on Twitter, it's great for that answer, but then someone will repeat the same question the day later.
Okay, so the last question, and I'm sure everybody wants to know, is what's the ETA on an untethered iOS 6 jailbreak for the iPhone 5 and all other devices?
Wow, I mean, have we ever really given a real answer to that kind of question ever?
Probably not, but
I mean,
an approximation.
By the time you're seeing us give videos or screenshots of things actually working, I mean, at that point you can start to really have a realistic expectation of an ETA being somewhat accurate. But when you're in the exploratory stage, it's just impossible to have any sort of accurate ETA. You can certainly have hopes, but...
So yeah, you've heard it first, you can certainly have hopes, but not just yet, right? So I think that's it. We've come to pretty much the end of the panel. Thank you everybody for joining us today, and of course thank you to our panelists for being here with us in Malaysia. We hope you guys enjoy the rest of the show. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.